in the middle of a bustling airport terminal, where rolling suitcases echo across sleek tile and announcements buzz through the air. A moment of sharp contrast captures everyone's attention. A well-dressed white woman lies startled and in pain at the base of an escalator. Moments earlier, she had dismissed a young black boy with a cold glare and curt words. But now, as fellow travelers rush past, eyes averted or phones in hand, he is the only one who turns back. He extends his hand to help her up, despite everything she said. What unfolds next will not only flip the narrative, it will reveal the humanity most people leave behind at baggage claim. If you've ever seen prejudice shattered by kindness, this story will resonate deeply. Location: Midway International Airport. Time: 4:02 p.m. Monday afternoon. Midway buzzes with controlled chaos. It is the kind of airport morning filled with half-zipped bags, overfilled coffee cups, and sharp voices calling out boarding zones. Parents juggle strollers and toddlers. Digital signs blink with last-minute gate changes. Luggage wheels squeal against polished floors like sneakers on a basketball court. Business travelers weave through the crowd with practiced ease. Security lines curve like snakes between metal poles. Overhead announcements echo across terminals, barely audible above the chatter. Among the crowd, Margaret Whitmore walks with unmistakable authority. Her silver heels click precisely. Her tailored navy suit hugs her frame perfectly. Her designer carry-on glides behind her like a shadow. Her expression is fixed, practiced. She checks her boarding pass once, tucks it back into her leather tote, and adjusts the gold pin on her lapel. Everything about her says control, confidence, power. As she approaches the security escalator, she spots a young boy standing near the bottom step. He looks no older than 10. He is black, wearing a slightly oversized hoodie and untied sneakers. A small backpack hangs from one shoulder. He steps politely to the side as she nears. "Careful," he says, his voice polite and soft. Margaret barely glances at him. "Watch yourself," she mutters. "I don't need help." She moves forward, placing one heel on the first moving step. The escalator hums beneath her. She adjusts her footing and shifts her weight. But just as she reaches the final third of the descent, her heel catches in the groove between steps. The sharp metal edge yanks her balance sideways. In a flash, her body twists. Conversations stop. The sound of plastic wheels, intercom announcements, and flight calls fade for a moment. The boy rushes over. People begin to glance, a few slowing their pace. No one stops. Most just keep walking. Have you ever misjudged someone in an instant? Be honest. What happened next? Miles Jenkins, age 11, sat quietly in gate area B-19, his small backpack balanced on his lap. It was his first time flying alone. A laminated tag clipped to his jacket identified him as a solo minor traveler. Tucked inside the plastic sleeve was a paper boarding pass, folded neatly and clipped with a red paperclip. His sneakers tapped lightly on the floor while he watched planes taxi across the tarmac. Though a little nervous, he carried himself with calm focus. He had packed and repacked his bag twice. He had double-checked the gate number and boarding time. Everything was ready. Miles was heading to visit his aunt in Cleveland. His mom had hugged him hard before they left the apartment that morning. She whispered, "Call me as soon as you land, okay? And remember to be kind." He promised he would. Raised by his mother, a hospital nurse who worked the night shift, Miles had always grown up with a sense of responsibility. He knew how to set his alarm, toast bread, and pack a lunch. When she got home from her shift, he was the one who brewed her tea and left sticky notes that said things like, "Rest well, Mom." They lived in a small apartment on the third floor of an aging building. The walls were thin, the elevator slow, but it was home. Miles kept it tidy. He helped carry groceries, folded laundry, and made sure to do his homework without being asked. He was known in the building as the boy who helped. If an elderly neighbor dropped her mail, Miles was there. If a stray cat was stuck in a stairwell, he coaxed it out gently. He once carried a heavy bag of flour 3 flights up for Mrs. Garcia, who still waved at him every time she passed. Miles loved science. His favorite book was a guide to at-home experiments using baking soda and vinegar. He spent hours reading superhero comics and imagining new powers that helped people in quiet ways, powers like mending things or calming storms. Despite being quiet, Miles paid attention. He noticed when someone looked lost. He picked up wrappers that blew across the sidewalk. He always held the door. His mother had taught him one rule above all: even if they do not smile back, you show them who you are. Speak with respect. Help when you can. That morning, she said it again as she smoothed the front of his hoodie and adjusted the laminated tag. Then she kissed his forehead and said, "You've got this, baby. I'm proud of you already." Miles had nodded. He was nervous, but he knew how to carry himself. Now, waiting at the airport, he scanned the people moving past. A woman with 3 kids trying to juggle coffee and bags. A couple arguing quietly about a missed connection. A businessman yelling into a phone. His mother's words echoed in his head. Show them who you are. Know a kid who acts older than their age? Drop their name in the comments. Sometimes maturity wears small shoes and carries a big heart. Margaret was halfway down the escalator when it happened. Her silver heel wobbled, just slightly, but enough to make her shift her weight. She tried to steady herself, gripping the rail with one hand, but the heel snapped clean against the steel tread. The sharp crack echoed like a warning. Her balance faltered. Her suitcase, perched behind her, tipped forward, dragging her off-center. In an instant, her world tilted. She twisted at the waist, her arms reaching to grab the handrail, but her grip slipped. The bag rolled forward and collided with her shin. Her foot gave way completely. She tumbled backward. Her hip slammed against the jagged edge of a moving step. A yelp burst from her lips. One shoe flew off and landed ahead of her. Her carry-on bounced violently, clattering toward the bottom. She hit the floor with a thud that drew gasps from those nearby. Her mascara streaked in thick lines down her cheeks. Her palms scraped the ridged metal, leaving behind red streaks. Her hair spilled from its tight twist. Her body sprawled awkwardly at the base of the escalator. A businessman behind her muttered something and stepped over her. Another woman glanced down, furrowed her brow, and moved around her quickly. Someone sighed and pulled out their phone, not to help, but to check their gait. Margaret lay stunned. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. She blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Pain radiated from her side. Her stocking was torn. She raised her head slightly and looked around. People moved past her as if she were a piece of misplaced luggage. Some cast a glance. Most did not. Her voice broke, loud but quivering. "Help me, please." Dozens of heads turned. Some paused. None stepped forward. She winced as she tried to sit up. Her wrist ached. She pushed up on one elbow and looked at the growing circle of strangers who would not come any closer. She had walked through this terminal many times, always with confidence, always in control. But now she was no longer invisible. She was vulnerable. And still no one moved. Her eyes began to well. Her mouth opened again, but the next words would not come. Have you ever seen people walk away from someone in need? What did you do? Share the truth. The silence says more than we think. From halfway up the escalator, Miles froze. He had heard the thud. He had seen the way she fell. He watched as the suitcase bounced away, as her hair came undone, as her voice cracked through the terminal. The woman who had snapped at him. The one who brushed past without thanks. He hesitated for just a moment. A crowd had gathered in silence. Heads tilted. Phones flicked. Feet shuffled. But no one moved forward. Miles felt his heart pound. He looked around for security, for someone in uniform. No one came. Then he heard his mother's voice in his mind. Kindness doesn't need permission. That was all he needed. He turned against the flow of the moving stairs, stepping carefully, one foot after the other, small hands gripping the sides for balance. He ignored the mutters from those behind him, the surprised looks from travelers heading up. When he reached the bottom, he stepped off and made his way to her. Margaret sat on the floor, her breathing shallow, her wrist clutched to her side. Her mascara smudged further as her eyes darted toward him. He knelt beside her. She recognized him instantly. "You again," she whispered, her voice edged with disbelief. "Don't touch me." Miles kept his tone calm. "You're bleeding. You hit your head. Let me help you sit up." She shook her head weakly, but made no move to stop him. He carefully slid her suitcase within reach, then picked up the heel that had flown across the floor. Gently, he placed it next to her. "Your shoe?" She blinked at him. He could see the confusion in her face, the pain, the pride refusing to ask again. He placed one hand behind her shoulder, the other supporting her elbow. "Slow, okay?" One step at a time. Margaret winced but nodded slightly. Together they shifted her weight. He helped her sit upright, resting her back against the side of a bench. Her hand trembled as she wiped at her face. The streaks darkened. Still, no one stepped closer. Miles glanced around. The security guards were still nowhere to be seen. "Do you want me to get someone?" he asked. Margaret closed her eyes. "Number just stay for a minute." He did. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped just enough to release tension. For a moment, neither of them said anything. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small pack of tissues. He offered one silently. She took it. "Would you help someone who hurt you? Be honest. What would you do?" Sometimes kindness is the loudest answer. A few feet away, phones began to rise. Travelers had stopped to watch. Some filmed quietly, their screens aimed at the boy kneeling beside the woman who, moments earlier, had pushed past him. Whispers spread across the small crowd. "Is he trying to steal from her?" A woman murmured to her companion. Another voice responded, sharper. "That kid's helping. Can't you see that?" More people turned. Some moved closer, still hesitant. Others stayed planted where they were, phones steady in their hands. Then came the thud of boots against tile. A TSA officer rushed over, eyes scanning the situation. He knelt quickly beside them. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice firm but calm. Margaret looked up. Her eyes were glassy. She glanced at Miles, then back at the officer. "He saved me," she said quietly, the words barely audible. "He came back when no one else did." The TSA officer looked at Miles, then back at Margaret. He nodded slowly and radioed for a wheelchair. "Help's coming. Just sit tight." The crowd had grown. Still, no one else stepped forward, but the air had shifted. A man near the back clapped once, then again. Others joined in, slow and respectful. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. Someone wiped a tear. A child tugged at their parent's sleeve and whispered, "Is he a hero?" Miles stood up and stepped back slightly as the TSA officer took over. He looked uncertain, unsure if he had done too much or not enough. Margaret reached out and gently touched his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for not walking away." He nodded once. As the crowd parted to allow the wheelchair through, many turned their heads toward the boy. A few gave him a thumbs up. One woman mouthed, "Good job." The videos would later spread online. But in that moment, what mattered most was not who recorded, but who acted. Have you ever apologized and truly meant it? What led you there? Sometimes it takes falling to see clearly. That night, a TikTok video exploded across the internet. It opened with shaky footage of Margaret Whitmore's fall at the bottom of the airport escalator. The camera caught the moment her heels snapped, her body twisted, and she hit the tile floor with a sharp gasp. It showed the seconds that followed, the stillness, the hesitation, the people walking by, and then it captured something else. From the side of the frame, Miles appeared, a small backpack, laminate tag swinging from his chest, his quiet steps against the flow, his hands lifting her suitcase, his voice, though muffled, calm and steady. Then came her words. "He saved me. He came back when no one else did." The video ended with a long pause. Margaret's tear-streaked face turned toward the camera. A TSA officer kneeling, Miles standing quietly, uncertain of the attention. By morning, the video had 2 million views. Comments flooded in. "Raised right. Courage in sneakers. That boy is everything good." Hashtags began to spread. Miles, the brave. Grace in motion. See, teach them right on Twitter, a user wrote. "I hope that kid knows the world saw him choose kindness." Instagram accounts reshared it with captions like, "When you wonder if it still exists, here's your answer." News outlets picked it up quickly. Local stations led with the clip during evening broadcasts. National programs followed within hours. The story ran on morning television, news websites, and digital newsletters. On Good Morning America, the anchor played the clip and added, "When others turned away, a child turned around." Miles did not watch the broadcast. His mother did. She sat at the kitchen table before her night shift, her phone in one hand, a warm mug in the other. Tears welled in her eyes as she saw her son kneel beside the woman and offer help without hesitation. She pressed a kiss to his forehead before walking out the door. Meanwhile, Margaret had been flooded with messages as well. Some supportive, some skeptical, many surprised. She chose to respond in a quiet, simple video from her living room. She wore a sweatshirt and no makeup. Her ankle was wrapped in a brace. Her voice was soft but clear. "I have always seen myself as strong," she said. "Independent, unshaken. But that day I fell, not just physically, but in the way I judged someone who showed more grace than I did." She paused. He reminded me that grace often comes from the least expected places. She ended the video with 6 words. "Thank you, Miles. You changed me." The video was reposted by thousands. Some stitched it with their own reflections. Others used it as a teachable moment. Teachers showed it in classrooms. Parents shared it with their children. A few strangers even left thank you notes at the airport's information desk addressed to the boy who helped. Miles, meanwhile, went back to school. His teacher asked him if he wanted to speak in front of the class. He shook his head. "I just didn't want her to be alone," he said. "That's all." Have you ever seen a video that made you act differently? Share it below. Sometimes one clip is enough to shift how we move in the world. A week after the fall, Margaret requested a private meeting. She did not want cameras or reporters. No press, no production, just a quiet conversation. The airport arranged a reserved section in one of the lounges. It was early morning. Light poured through the wide windows overlooking the tarmac. A tray of tea and juice sat untouched on a low table. The space was quiet, almost too still. Miles arrived with his mother hand in hand. He wore his school uniform, backpack slung over one shoulder. His mother looked composed but cautious, her eyes scanning the lounge until they landed on Margaret. Margaret stood when they entered. Gone were the heels and the suit. She wore flats, jeans, and a simple blouse. She smiled, slightly nervous. "Thank you for coming," she said. They sat across from each other with Miles between the two women. Margaret took a breath. "I want to explain something. Not to excuse how I treated you, but to give context." She folded her hands in her lap. "I work in a world that is fast, competitive, and, honestly, unforgiving. I am often taught, subtly and directly, that difference means risk, that standing out means slowing down. So I moved through places like this one as if they belonged only to people like me." She turned to Miles. "I was trained to see difference as danger, and you changed that." Miles listened quietly, eyes steady. "You showed me what grace looks like when it is least expected, and what it means to act not because you are welcomed, but because you know it is right." His mother sat quietly, watching Margaret with a blend of curiosity and caution. Margaret reached for a package on the seat beside her. Wrapped in dark blue paper with a silver ribbon, she handed it gently to Miles. "I wanted to give you something that matches your heart. Inside is a letter of sponsorship for a national youth leadership program, and a custom laptop, fully loaded. Not a favor, a start." Miles opened the box slowly, lifting the lid to reveal the contents. His mouth opened slightly in surprise. He looked to his mother. She blinked quickly, holding back tears. Then she pulled him into a hug. "You deserve this," she whispered. "All of it." Margaret sat back in her chair, visibly lighter. "I thought I came here today to say thank you, but really, I came to tell you I am sorry, and that I see the world differently now, because of you." She turned to his mother. "You raised him with strength and care. I can see that in every word he says." They exchanged a long look. No more was needed. Miles sat between them, his fingers resting on the ribbon. He smiled. Margaret stood. "Sometimes the smallest people make the biggest difference," she said, her voice warm. As they prepared to leave, Margaret extended a hand to Miles. He shook it, then hugged her without hesitation. His mother watched with a quiet smile, one hand on her son's back. Outside the lounge, planes took off one by one. But inside, a different kind of flight had already begun. Have you ever seen someone change because of kindness? Tell us about it. Change often starts with a single choice. In the weeks that followed, Midway Airport changed. Not in the architecture or the flight schedules, but in something deeper, a tone, a message, a new sense of purpose. They launched a campaign called "Look Again, Lend a Hand." Large posters appeared in terminal walkways and near every gate. They featured a photo of Miles, standing near the escalator, mid-smile. Below his image were 6 simple words. "Kindness doesn't need permission." The phrase echoed across the airport. It was printed on banners near the baggage claim, on signs by the check-in kiosks, and on digital screens above the food court. Travelers began receiving small info cards with their boarding passes. The cards gave guidance on how to recognize when someone needed help and how to offer safe, quick aid in emergencies. Staff training sessions were updated to include a short segment titled "The Miles Moment." Security footage from that day was edited into a 5-minute video and shown during employee orientation. Not to shame, but to teach, to show how easy it is to look away and how powerful it is to step forward. Miles and his mother returned to the airport one afternoon by invitation. A press conference had been arranged by the city. The mayor presented Miles with a Good Samaritan Medal, a citywide honor rarely given. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned in. The medal hung from a red ribbon that settled against Miles's chest like it belonged there. This young man reminded us that bravery has no age, the mayor said, that integrity does not wear a uniform, and that compassion is still alive in our city. Miles shook his hand politely. He smiled at the cameras. But when asked for a quote, he kept it simple. I just didn't want her to be alone. The mayor looked at him and nodded. That is enough. At school, the news was met with cheers. His class threw a small celebration in the gym. Banners hung from the walls. One read, Miles, our everyday hero. Teachers brought cupcakes. Students clapped. His science teacher gave him a framed copy of the campaign poster. It would hang just outside the classroom door. But the biggest surprise came at the library. The principal stood with Miles and his mother beside a freshly painted corner, filled with books and new beanbag chairs. A small wooden sign hung above the shelf. The Miles Jenkins Reading Nook, for those who care quietly. His mother held his hand tightly as applause filled the space. Miles looked around at the faces, his classmates, his teachers, his principal, and said only, "Thank you." The ripples kept going. Other airports called Midway asking about their campaign. Schools requested copies of the training materials. Local newspapers ran a column every Friday highlighting other acts of everyday kindness. But Miles stayed the same. He still took out the trash without being asked. Still helped neighbors carry groceries. Still wrote little reminder notes for his mom on the fridge. He never bragged, never wanted to be a symbol. He just hoped that maybe, if another person fell or felt unseen, someone else might remember to stop. What initiative would you start if you could? Drop your dream project. One person can start a ripple. Maybe you are next. One act of kindness can do more than patch a moment. It can rewire a belief, rebuild trust, and reshape the pulse of a place. That is what happened at Midway. It began with a fall, but it ended in a lift, not just of one person, but of many. A boy gave more than help. He gave something harder to measure, dignity, forgiveness, and a second chance. He gave it quietly, without being asked, and without waiting for permission. Miles Jenkins, 11 years old, moved through that airport like any other child. Backpack slung over his shoulder, ticket clipped to his jacket, eyes open to the world. But where others paused, he stepped forward. Where others looked away, he looked again. Because of that choice, a stranger found comfort. An airport changed its mission. A city paused to listen. And Margaret, the woman who once scoffed at the idea of needing help, she now speaks in classrooms and corporate offices. She tells her story not with shame, but with purpose. I did not see him that day, she says, because I was trained to see only what made me comfortable. But he saw me, not as someone who had snapped at him, not as someone who ignored him, but as someone who had fallen and needed help. Her words land heavy and honest. Her voice often breaks when she reaches the end. He reminded me to see with my heart, not just my eyes. Back at Midway, the escalator where it all began has changed. Not the steps or the steel or the sounds, but now, beside it, mounted on a smooth marble base, sits a bronze plaque. It reads, "To the boy who showed us what rising looks like. Miles Jenkins, travelers pass it every day. Some pause. Some take photos. Some simply nod and move on. But many notice, many remember. Teachers bring students by on field trips. Pilots glance at it on their way to the gates. Janitors nod to it during late-night shifts. Its presence is quiet, but powerful, because that is how change often arrives, not in headlines or grand gestures, but in small, brave acts. Miles still walks through that airport sometimes. When he does not stop at the plaque. He smiles politely when people recognize him. He keeps his head down, still tucks his ticket into his backpack. He has new dreams now, bigger ones, but his actions remain the same. He holds doors. He notices when someone drops something. He still offers help, because that is who he is, a helper. A reminder that sometimes the smallest people carry the biggest truths. Who are you in the story? The bystander, the traveler, or the helper? Share this story. Say his name, Miles Jenkins.